And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking. ABSA is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. As The Money Show starts tonight, white smoke has just started to emerge from the pontifical chimney at the top of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican. The cardinals who have been in a conclave there have just elected a new pope to take over from Pope Francis, who, as you know, passed away several weeks ago. It is an election which only started 24 hours ago. This time, we saw smoke coming out, which was black. There was black smoke earlier today, and now white smoke emerging from the chimney above the Sistine Chapel. Father Russel Pollitt is a parish priest at the Holy Trinity Catholic Church, also a member of the Jesuits in South Africa. Father Pollitt, good evening. I appreciate you taking what for you will be a very special moment to speak to us this evening, but this is a big moment in the history of your church.
Yes, good evening, Stephen, and quite surprising, as I really thought this would only be happening tomorrow. So that means that the cardinals have after a fairly short time, when there's been a talk of a lot of kind of wrestling with who it will be, simply because there have been two strong kind of sides to the church in the aftermath of Pope Francis's papacy, and they have clearly very quickly agreed on somebody.
It's obviously at this stage, as I talk to you now, we don't actually know the identity of the person. As I understand the process, you will know it better than I, Father Pollitt. I'm expecting that, I can't remember the name of the official, will come onto a balcony and announce the new pope. In fact, there are one or two special Latin phrases that are used here too.
Yes, so the Cardinal Deacon, and if I remember correctly, his name is Mamberti, he will come on and he will announce, he will say in Latin, he will say, "It is with great joy that I announce that we have a pope." And then he will call out the name of the cardinal, and he will then also give us the name that the man has chosen to be known by, which will be a name of one of the saints. But that will probably only be in about an hour's time, because what they will do now is they will, all the cardinals will greet the new pope, is what they normally do. We never know with these things, because they do sort of change things. They will greet the new pope, and then finally he will appear on the balcony.
So we could be some way from that. Obviously, there'll be a little bit of speculation over the next little while as to who it will be. But perhaps the fact that this has happened so quickly, this is one, I'm no expert on the papacy, but I think this is one of the quickest elections, one of the shortest elections that we've seen in the history of the Catholic Church.
Yes, it would be, because, well, in the last 100 years, because even Pope Francis, I think there were 5 ballots. The fact that this vote has come in now probably means there were only 4 ballots, which would have been 1 last night, 2 this morning, and then 1 this afternoon, that has led to this whoever it is being elected as Pope. So this is pretty quick, and lots of people have been predicting that it will probably take 3 days, like when John Paul II was elected. I think it was about 6 or 7 ballots. It happened after 3 days. This has happened pretty quickly for, in the last 100 years, we haven't had one this fast.
Father Russel Pollitt, I really do appreciate the time. Thank you, especially at this very special moment for you, the parish priest of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Johannesburg. The breaking news on the Money Show this evening: a new pope has been elected. White smoke emerging from the conclave in the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City. Let's get another view on this very quickly. Father Lawrence Ndlovu is the administrator of the Catholic Cathedral of Christ the King. Father Ndlovu, good evening to you, sir, and thank you also for sharing what for you I know will be a special moment with us. Your thoughts and your feelings as your church gets a new pope tonight?
Well, we are absolutely thrilled. This has been one of the, as you said earlier on, one of the more or less shorter conclaves, but I think it's the same as the last one. And so we now want to see who exactly it is.
Your congregation, how closely have they been watching this? I know there was a special mass at the Vatican City yesterday, and I think in many churches around Southern Africa, that mass was replicated. There were prayers for the new Pope, prayers for the people who were taking part in this process. How important has this been to your congregants?
Very important, because the Cardinal Archbishop of Johannesburg is the head of the Cathedral Church of Johannesburg. And if you walk into the cathedral, you see his chair and his personal coat of arms, Cardinal Stephen Brislin, on top of it. So yesterday when we saw them taking their oath, I mean, our people were so moved to see him take the oath of secrecy as well, their lives. So a lot of people have been following these activities. My congregation is also very Pan-African in a way. There's people from all over the continent in my congregation. So everybody has been wanting to follow sort of their own cardinals, and everybody has been trying to see, will it be an African cardinal? And all of that conversation has been very meaningful for us.
Father Lawrence Ndlovu, thank you. Really appreciate the time. The administrator of the Catholic Cathedral of Christ the King. To recap the breaking news, white smoke from the Sistine Chapel, the conclave of Roman Catholic cardinals electing a new pope. But that person, that new pope, will first be taken into a special room to be dressed and in the papal vestments. And then, as I understand it, in about 45 minutes, maybe an hour from now, we expect an announcement on the big balcony above the Sistine Chapel. And only then will we learn the identity. I am not clear at this moment if the new Pope will speak this evening, but there may well be an expectation that he will. We will, of course, keep you updated with this on The Money Show and after this evening.
The Money Show
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, there aren't many news events that would have knocked the trade deal between the US and the UK tonight off the start of the introduction to The Money Show, or the fact that the US President Donald Trump has said that he believes talks between the US and China this weekend will go very well. But of course, the election of a pope is one of them. We will keep you up to date with that story, and of course we will bring you the latest developments, and the moment we know the identity of the new pope, we'll bring that to you as well on The Money Show. To other news now, and in Delmas and in Mpumalanga, hundreds of workers protesting over the last few days because they haven't been paid by their employers. Daybreak Farms, Daybreak is owned by the state. It hasn't paid its workers. It hasn't provided feed for the hundreds of thousands of chicks on its property. As a result, the Labour Department was at the factory today. The NSPCA has had to cull over 300,000 chicks because no food has been provided for them. So then, how did this company get into this position? Sabelo Skiti is an investigative journalist at the Sunday Times. He's been reporting and investigating the situation at Daybreak for several years. Sabelo, good evening to you. I was reminded of your reporting today. It was clear that what you were telling us then led to the situation now. What was going on at Daybreak Farms?
Good evening, Stephen. Good evening to all the listeners out there. So I must say, as sad as it is to see the recent developments at Daybreak, for me it was, as you say, more of the same really, but an escalation, of course, in terms of what we'd reported before. If you'd remember, a couple of years ago, we had sort of told you about how a board that had been appointed to oversee Daybreak, which included, I must add, an employee, senior employee at the PIC being the sole owner of this business, had basically gone rogue. They had gotten rid of the management team that had been there at Daybreak, a management team that had turned that business around and, were actually making quite healthy profits. They hounded them out in an attempt to basically wrest control of the company and then do, of course, what always happens with the state-owned companies, just begin a whole looting exercise. In the end, they had taken about 150 million rand outside of the company without following, any sort of due process in the contracts and the procurement that, this money was fleeced out of the company through. And for me, one of the things that had stuck out is that these guys had then gone to the extent of spending almost 60 rand trying to sort of hound and frustrate and intimidate these executives at the time. This included civil litigation. At some point, they charged one of the executives, part of whom had blown the board to the PIC about what was happening there. for fraud and money laundering, and all of this stemmed from an acting allowance that this executive had been given at the PIC at the time. But I mean, all in all, Stephen, it was just a story about broken governance, very clear looting on a large scale at that chicken producer.
I mean, is it possible to know where the money went? As you say, 60 million rand spent just to trying to silence a whistleblower. I mean, it seemed to have done what is a little bit of a pattern sometimes, goes to law firms, goes on quite strange things.
Yes. So I think the bulk of that 57 million was for, I think, to put it broadly, legal advice and legal work that, this law firm, which had been linked to none other than, the PIC's company secretary as the shareholder of Daybreak. They basically were invoicing Daybreak for all sorts of legal services related to the purge of these executives. They spent the bulk of that, I think 27 million, on what they called civil litigation on a matter that was never brought to court. The other money then went, of course, to the criminal charges, to the extent where these guys, went and did an Anton Pillar application before the court, which is similar to an ex parte application, where you go to the court and you say that you want to make this application to recover devices and do a search and seizure at a particular individual's residence, but without them knowing about it, because we have a fear that they might destroy evidence. So they did all of that. All of those monies were spent. And again, the evidence that was supposedly taken there never made it to court. It certainly never made it to be part of the criminal trial, because we know that after a couple of postponements, the NPA then, provisionally withdrew these charges because they had no evidence. From my understanding, that docket, by the time it went to court, had only one statement, and that was the complainant statement.
Sure. I mean, this went on for some time. I remember your reporting, and no one did anything. I mean, the PIC surely, I know they've issued statements this week, concern, etc., but someone should have been able to do something.
Yeah, Stephen, I think for me, the PIC has been the greatest disappointment. And I think, again, they continue to make a case for us to ask, why is this, fund manager given 2.6 trillion of what is essentially, civil servants' retirement money, when they show the sort of disdain that they've shown in this Daybreak case. You're quite correct. They did issue a statement, I think, yesterday evening, where they were, almost lamenting the situation that, the company finds itself in. But if you go back to, what I've told you about, in our chat now, the involvement of the company secretary in the appointment of that board was outlined in their own forensic investigation. In fact, none other than Abel Stolle himself had deposed in an application to remove the old board, in which he basically spoke about the fact that it was an improper process to appoint this board. This board had gone rogue. It's not taking instruction from the shareholder. And within that board is an individual that was a PIC employee. You would think that once that board had been removed, action would have been taken against this employee. Instead, that employee is in an even more senior position in the same PIC. The company secretary, who had also been a partner to this legal firm that I'm talking about, well, to one of the directors of the legal firm, it showed that there was a clear conflict, and she had been involved in the appointment of the board. She still remains company secretary at the PIC. So for me, the PIC's concern leaves me very cold, Stephen, because I'm simply not convinced that their action matched their words.
I mean, the whole thing is, if you look at what's happening now, and there'll be horror and hand-wringing and poor workers and the NSPCA and the chicks and all of that. But all of this, and how many times has this happened, Sabelo? And all of this was kind of foretold. It goes back to the same thing. No one did anything. And by the way, as I'm talking to you, I'm reminded of Raymond Joseph's incredible reporting about the National Lottery.
Yeah. No, it's more of the same, Stephen. It's more of the same. You get the sort of well-meaning media statements that are put out there, but there's very little action. The action, if anything, actually shows that they are in support of this looting and this rampant, sort of misuse of very, very precious state funds. Just seems to continue.
Sabelo Skiti, thanks very much indeed. Investigative journalist at the Sunday Times. Really appreciate the context around Daybreak Farms.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Gary Boyson is Director and Portfolio Analyst at Rands Swiss. Gary, good evening. Nice to have you on our market commentary tonight. The US and the UK signing this big trade deal. Markets, obviously, and US markets are open right now, will be fairly excited about that.
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah. So looking at it, the US markets are certainly loving it. So you're seeing the S&P 500 up around 1.4%. We've got the NASDAQ up almost 1.8% at the moment. And I think it's because it's the first deal of the many promised bilateral agreements that Trump has touted. Yeah, there's no doubt markets are excited, and it's I suppose the buying is really coming in very specific sectors as well. You've got the likes of Boeing up around 4%, and that's because Boeing was actually mentioned in the announcement, saying that the UK would buy around 10 billion worth of orders through Boeing, whether that's going to be parts or actual airframes, we don't know yet. And also, I suppose it's important to note that this deal hasn't actually been signed. Keir Starmer was apparently coming in remotely, and they haven't actually hammered out the final details. They're just saying that it's going to reduce tariffs on the likes of cars. 100,000 cars can be exported to the US. That tariff's dropping from 25% to 10%. Steel and aluminium actually going to a 0% tariff. And of course, Donald Trump also touting the sectors that have strong lobby groups in the swing states, the likes of beef, ethanol, chemical exports, machinery, saying that he's opening up markets for the US. So the dollar's liking it as well. So we've got the dollar index up over 100. Although if you look at the cables, the US, the pound dollar exchange rate, not too much movement there. So I think still a lot of moving parts, and we'll see how it plays out.
And I imagine also a lot of sort of speculation around Trump's comments that he does believe the US and China will have a good weekend this weekend. Here at home, SAPI shares ending the day down. They were down 14% at one point. I think they ended down by around 8.9%. And I mean, yes, they did make a loss. But contrast that with Mondi, who had a much better quarter. And I mean, their shares were up nearly 2%. The contrast is incredibly stark.
Yeah, I think it's also the underlying businesses themselves. Mondi really focusing on packaging, saying that they're seeing increasing demand in their sustainable packaging, and part of it also that Mondi's managing to keep their costs under control, and they understand that some of the pricing around packaging and paper at this stage is falling, largely due to oversupply, and Mondi's managing to control their costs. So their trading statement was a lot thinner in terms of information as well, but it was fairly optimistic. SAPI, on the other hand, as you say, swinging to a loss, pointing really to the dissolving wood pulp, which is used in clothing manufacture, and highlighting the risks around the global trade war, saying that the normal seasonal boost that you see in DWP, so this dissolving wood pulp, after Chinese New Year, just hasn't materialized this year as people take a wait and see approach, and you can see that the global trade patterns are being disrupted. So 20 million rand loss for SAPI, difficult, definitely. They also, with Mondi, actually managed to avoid some maintenance issues at some of their plants. There was scheduled maintenance which took a little bit of volume out of SAPI as well, but overall, as you say, a knee-jerk reaction to begin with, but towards the end of the day, markets stabilized, and as you say, finishing just under 9% down.
And then the only people who sort of lose out are the gold producers. The gold price slightly softer today. Gold shares losing a little bit, some of them. But I mean, I don't think anyone will be crying. They've had such a good run.
Incredible run they've had, and it's difficult to say that the gold price is quoted in US dollars, and we've got a slightly stronger dollar, and that's making it look like gold is falling. But if we measure gold in rand, or if we measure it in euros or pounds, it's probably pretty stable at the moment. A lot of this coming from the dollar side of the essentially the gold dollar pair. Looking at the gold miners themselves, yes, having a negative day, but as you say, a massive run up. If you look at their all-in sustaining costs, or what they produce gold for, Harmony, Goldfields, Anglo Gold, they're just above $1,600 an ounce at a production level, and they're selling for $3,300 an ounce. I mean, that's incredible operating leverage, and all of that margin just falls straight to the bottom line and to shareholders. So you can understand why they've had such a good run, and just I think a blip today.
Gary Boyson, thank you. Director and Portfolio Analyst at Rands Swiss. Really appreciate the time on The Money Show tonight.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, good to hear from you this evening on 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. And, of course, voice notes on 072 702 1702. Feel free to comment as well, of course, on the events at the Vatican, the election of a new pope tonight, the white smoke emerging about half an hour ago. We don't yet know the identity of the new pope. I'm guessing that we will find out maybe just after 7 o'clock, perhaps just after 8 o'clock. But if I had to bet, I'm not really a betting man, or if I had to make a prophecy, I would suggest one of those two times. We will, of course, keep you up to date with the situation. The moment we know the identity, we'll bring that to you. Let's just talk about gas for a moment, though. And it does appear there's still major problems in the way of finding a solution to the looming gas supply crisis. The gas produced by Sasol from Mozambique due to run out in the next 2 years or so. Fin24 reporting today, industrial gas users are working together to try and import liquefied natural gas. The amounts of money that are needed to create the infrastructure to do this are absolutely huge. Jaco Human is the CEO of the Industrial Gas Users Association of Southern Africa. Jaco, good evening. What is going on at the moment? What is the industry doing to try and resolve this looming gas crisis?
Stephen, good evening. Of course, it's hard to compete with white smoke and the new pope, but we will certainly try our best. You are quite right. I mean, the gas crisis, or the gas cliff as we call it, has been communicated far and wide, and we all have a concept of what that means. Industry, of course, have spent a lot of effort and went to great lengths over the last couple of months, 18 months or so, to create a commercial platform to enable a alternative gas transaction, and that is for the importation of liquefied natural gas. Now, it has created a gas aggregator, in other words, pooling industrial volumes. It created a company called Gas Hub, which is now in the process of being incorporated with a board and shareholders, and it is on that, and in parallel with that, it entered into various negotiations on the supply of LNG. Now, LNG, on the one side, you have a gas molecule. On the other side, you are reliant on new infrastructure developments. And we are making progress. However, there are particular hurdles in place as we now moving into a space where to underwrite these type of transactions, buying LNG is one thing, but to underwrite this over a 15-year period and the infrastructure investments associated with that, of course, requires significant guarantees and the sureties for the lenders and developers of that infrastructure and supply. So it is that which we anticipate in the coming months, in the next 3 months or 4 months, we would have to focus on as we finding ourselves in a world where industry is unlikely to come up with a full set of guarantees to underpin this transaction.
I mean, the figure I read was 11 billion rand. Where would the money come from? I mean, would government have to underpin some of that? And that takes us to a complicated conversation as well.
Correct. So on the one hand, you have a capital investment requirement, or capex, to develop infrastructure of this nature. On the other hand, you need to have performance guarantees in terms of the tenure of the contract to ensure that those that are procuring would perform against those contracts. And then, of course, you have, to a lesser extent, payment guarantees. So it is between those three. You've got to underwrite the infrastructure investment. You've got to underwrite the performance against the contract over a 10 or 15-year period. And then you've got to have payment guarantees. It's the sum of that which equals the $600 million or estimated 11 billion rand. Now, clearly, if industry is compelled to do it, of course, it would have to sacrifice its own balance sheets in order to bring that to the table. Now, as these projects are in the national interest, what it actually means is that you are taking efficient capital and you apply it to capital which are in the national interest. Capital which usually attracts lesser returns, but are critical for economic growth and development and so on. So it is not a sustainable solution for us, and it's in that regard that we would look to the development banks, the state development banks, and or the government to support this transaction together with industry.
I mean, Jaco, every conversation you and I have had about this time is of the essence. We need to find the money. This needs to be sorted out. The infrastructure needs to be built. I know Sasol are looking at a sort of short-term kind of slightly artificial gas from coal measure. All of those things. Are things moving quickly enough? I'm a bit nervous as you answer it.
We are moving at the speed we can, believe me. The announcement by Sasol recently to provide the synthetic gas solution for a period of 2 years over and above the 2028 deadline actually buys us about 6 to 9 months to land everything. In the absence of that announcement, we would have had to rush into long-term agreements at risk and probably at cost, where we now actually have a little bit of breathing room to really look at the finer details of the underwriting of this transaction, the best commercial outcome of what we need. So it is absolutely critical that we go through together with Sasol with this extension and to provide us. We simply need to land this and box and wrap it up by the middle of next year. So we do have time. The work that we've done to date has actually set us up very well, but we cannot miss a beat. You are absolutely right.
Jaco Human, thanks very much indeed, CEO of the Industrial Gas Users Association of Southern Africa. There's so much going on at the moment, of course, around that gas issue. It's difficult to know exactly how this is going to land, but a lot of things need to happen very, very quickly indeed.
702.
702.
Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
8 minutes now to 7 the time. Good to hear from you this evening. 011 883 0702 and 021 446 0567. Keeping an eye, of course, on the Vatican City, where we expect the new Pope to emerge perhaps in 10 minutes. Perhaps a little longer than that, but fairly soon, one way or another. A quarterly update from the global alcohol producer Anheuser-Busch today that showed while they increased their profit, they are selling less beer. Earlier in the year, there were figures from Heineken saying the amount of wine they had sold in South Africa in the first quarter of the year was down by 20%. And at the same time, there is some evidence now that many people around the world appear to be drinking less alcohol. Maurice Smithers is an expert on alcohol policy and an activist with Working for an Alcohol Safer South Africa. It's an NGO. Maurice, good evening to you. How big is this apparent decline in the amount of alcohol that people around the world are drinking?
Hi, Stephen. Thanks very much for having me. Look, it's not clear because obviously when reports come out from a particular organization, such as AB InBev, they would look at it from their particular perspective. But it is very interesting to see in the last little while that there have been quite a number of articles that have been arguing that there is a decline in drinking. In fact, there's an article that appeared on the 21st of April entitled "The World Has Hit Peak Booze." Says humanity has passed a remarkable milestone. Alcohol consumption has gone into possible permanent decline. So it's very interesting to see that this has been happening, and this article tries to explain why this would be the case. Of course, nobody knows if it is an ongoing trend. Or if in fact it is something that's temporary, and I think it's particularly interesting that it's happening in the post-COVID period because during everybody expected there would be a resurgence of drinking of alcohol post-COVID, because even though it wasn't banned in other countries in the world, only about 10 countries during COVID, including South Africa, there were heavy restrictions around the world, and so everybody expected a huge resurgence, and that hasn't necessarily happened. So it's an interesting trend, but we don't know what the figures are, but it does seem to be a phenomenon with wine, with beer, and with spirits in certain cases. So what the causes are, we're not sure. It could be the economy, it could be economics, it could be a tendency towards health. Some are even arguing that it's the increasing decriminalization of marijuana, and that people are going for that rather than for alcohol.
Certainly, anecdotally, it seems younger people are not drinking as much as my generation, for example, depending on where in the world you are. But those younger people are also going out less, they're having less sex, they're breaking their arms fewer times through their lives as well. I mean, there are a lot of other things that have shifted, and different things are happening in different places. Peak alcohol in the UK was 2004. I'm presuming we haven't seen a big decline in South Africa, or have we?
Well, I'm not so sure. I think that I think there has been an indication that there's been a decline to an extent in South Africa as well, which has been troubling some providers. I don't think that it's as great as perhaps it might be seen in other parts of the world, but there definitely has been an indication that, and again, one doesn't know with which sector this might be the case. Whether it's within the white community, the black community, young people, women, but I don't think the market is booming. Let's put it that way. I don't think the market is booming in South Africa. And again, I would put that down probably to mostly the economy, because with the extent of unemployment we have in the country, there's just a large number of people that can't drink at all or drink very little, and even those who are employed are struggling. So therefore, it's not easy for people to actually be drinking as much as they used to. There also seems to be an indication that while there has been a push towards getting people to drink sort of higher level, more sort of expensive names, that people are choosing to go for cheaper alcohol rather than the more expensive brands.
There are other things too. I mean, I know in Russia it took them 10 years, but they lowered the amount of damage alcohol was doing to their society. I think they did 3 things, if I recall. Over time, they completely banned the advertising of alcohol. They limited its access. So Russia used to be a sort of 24-hour alcohol society. They basically imposed closing times on bottle stores. And the other thing they did was that over a period of 10 years, they raised the price of alcohol by 10% per unit, and it sort of doubled over 10 years. I mean, those are things our government could follow. Certainly has the legislative power, would probably have the political support if it tried.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was the direction that we were going from the period from 2010 to 2017. We were definitely moving in the direction of a more a kind of legislative regime, which would have led to a significant reduction in alcohol harm across the country, and that's including less binge drinking, less violence against women, less road traffic incidents as a result of drinking and driving and so on. But unfortunately, in 2017, that came to a grinding halt. And despite what we learned in COVID, we don't seem to be going anywhere really at the moment, even though people keep saying that the passing of the Liquor Amendment Bill is imminent. There's no indication that's the case. I mean, in our view, to be honest, we need a much more fundamental change. One of the things that we have realized from examining the way in which the legislative environment works in South Africa, it's actually very difficult to develop a national solution to what is really a national problem. And that's because of the way in which the Constitution gives liquor licensing authority to provinces. So national government has actually very little authority over what happens with liquor licensing, operating hours, types of licenses, numbers of licenses, and all of those things. There's certain things that they can do, but even those, we think, I mean, I had a conversation with a senior official from the DTIC a year or two back, and this person said to me, well, we're a bit nervous about pushing the Liquor Amendment Bill through because we think it might be taken to the Constitutional Court again. And what they were referring to was that in 1999, when the initial liquor bill was drafted, the one that led to the Liquor Act of 2003, the presidency sent the bill to the Constitutional Court because they thought it was very likely that the bill was national overreach, and the Constitutional Court agreed and said that they were going too far. So we feel that that's a major change that needs to happen. The second thing that...
All right, Maurice, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to end it there. Busy news day today. As you know, Maurice Smithers is an activist working with the Alcohol Safer South Africa, 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening, I'm Stephen Grootes. Welcome to the second hour of the program. Obviously watching the situation in the Vatican very closely. We do have some interviews lined up to talk to you. We will be talking to Siphumelele Zondi in a moment about the sad passing of Skype. We'll have small business focus, also investment school this evening. However, if the identity of the new Pope is revealed, and if in fact there is the announcement from the famous balcony at the Sistine Chapel, us moneylenders will stand aside and let the temple take over for a few moments. In other words, we will keep you up to date with that. As you heard earlier, Father Russel Pollitt just explaining the process, that usually about an hour after the election, after the white smoke was first seen, that was an hour ago now, it was 8 minutes after 6, my count. We do have screens here showing us, of course, the balcony, and we will go live there. I must just tell you, I am not sure which language the announcements would be made. If you had to ask me now, I would suggest Latin. You may need to go and find a Latin speaker in your family to find out what is being said. And I'm also not certain if the new Pope will actually speak in English this evening, but we'll bring it all to you. Lots to come in the next little while. Good to hear from you as well on 011 8830702, 021 4460567, and voice notes, PayPal and otherwise on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, like me, you might be of a generation that remembers how expensive it used to be to try and speak to someone in another country, especially if they were overseas, if they were in Europe or the US or China or somewhere. How difficult it was. I remember once phoning another country, neighboring country, 15 times just to get through, and even then I could hardly hear the person on the other side. People older than me will remember having to book phone conversations days in advance on party lines to do it. But I also remember, for the first time, being able to make calls like that almost for free on Skype. And it was like magic to hear someone talking to you and it cost you almost nothing. Skype is closing down this week. Siphumelele Zondi is our tech expert. Siphumelele, good evening. I actually had a little bit of a turn when I heard Skype was going. I just remember so clearly it was the first thing that allowed me to connect to people far away without having to cost the earth.
Totally right. Hello, Stephen. That was in the early 2000s. So Skype was founded, 22 or so years ago now. And that's when the announcement was made to the world that Skype had been founded. And in a space of about a year, it already had about 11 million users, which shows that it was quite popular at the time, and it's something that people felt they needed. It came out of Estonia, a place you wouldn't expect such technology to come from. We haven't had a lot of things that we've used that come from the country, East European country of Estonia. But after 11 months, it had 11 million users. After a couple of years, at its peak, it had 300 million people around the world that were using it for, whether it was for business purposes, whether it was for personal purposes. And at a point, it's been sold a couple of times as well, because in about 2005, it was bought by eBay. A few years later, Microsoft then went ahead and bought it, and they've been the owners of it since about 2011.
So, I mean, in a way, I suppose the question is, what did Microsoft do with it? And one thing they did do is that you could have more than one person on the line. Families were kept together by all of this. But its day has now passed. Why is it now closing?
Oh, totally. It's because of a lot of competition, right? Because when it started, it was revolutionary. And as you say, you'd make a call for absolutely nothing. And at the time when it was becoming popular, laptops or home laptops were a relatively new thing for a lot of people. So a lot of people were having cameras on devices that were laptops for the very first time. But it was a transition to smartphone technology that Microsoft couldn't do. And they also then went ahead and developed Microsoft Teams as well, even though they had bought Skype, instead of perhaps developing Skype into what they wanted Microsoft Teams to be. And they didn't use any of the technology that Skype already had. They built Microsoft Teams completely from scratch. And when you think about the amount of video calling spaces that we can be in, it can be on WhatsApp video call. If you have an iPhone, it also has its own features.
Siphumelele, I'm going to interrupt you there. I'm sorry about this. We're going now to the Vatican City, where I can see several people are emerging onto the steps, onto the balcony there.
One carrying the microphone, of course, the text for him, just in case it becomes overwhelming. At least he doesn't get lost in terms of what he has to say.
Right. Well, we expect now the sound to come from, I believe, a French archdeacon who's about to make an announcement.
Annuncio vobis gaudium magnum. Habemus papam.
That's Latin for "we have a pope."
Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost. Qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem decimum quartum.
The announcement there of a new pope, just trying to get the name for you. Obviously, this coming through to us from our colleagues at Newsroom Africa. And of course, this is also in Latin, so we're just trying to get the identity for you. We can see on the screens also groups of cardinals who've gathered on other balconies in the same chapel. We do expect that the new pope is, and a normal procedure, will come and actually speak very briefly. I don't know what they'll say or which language it will be in the next few moments. And there we have confirmation that the American Cardinal Robert Prevost has been named as the new pope. The new leader of the Roman Catholic Church is Cardinal Robert Prevost, who comes from the United States. The name that the new Pope has taken, he is going to call himself Pope Leo. Obviously Latin for lion, but he will be calling himself Pope Leo. And Robert Prevost is the new Pope from the United States. These are the sounds coming to you live from the Vatican City as thousands of Roman Catholics have gathered in the square there, waiting to see Pope Leo make his first public appearance. I cannot remember if, in fact, this would be the first time that we have had a Pope from North America, but it is the second time we've had someone from the Americas because of course, Pope Francis was from Argentina.
And there we have it.
All right. Okay, so that feed coming to us from Newsroom Africa. We await then to see if the new Pope is in fact going to speak this evening. We'll watch those proceedings very, very closely and keep you updated on all of that as well. But the breaking news then, Pope Leo, formerly Cardinal Robert Prevost, is the new Pope, the new leader of the Roman Catholic Church.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
20 minutes after 7, the time normally we would go to our small business feature, of course, on The Money Show. We are keeping an eye on that, but we do just want to keep the coverage and continue with the coverage of the election of the new Pope, Pope Leo, formerly Cardinal Robert Prevost, hails from Chicago, from the United States, but over 10 years ago became a naturalized citizen of Peru, and someone who spent much of his life there, but someone also who comes from the United States. And as I understand it, he'll be the first person, I think, from North America to be elected Pope. There have been popes from Africa in the past, but you have to go back over 1,300 years or so to see that. And that, of course, is a very long time ago. We know very little about the people who were leading the Catholic Church at that time, unfortunately. We are expecting now that there will be a new pope, that the new pope will come and be shown to the world. We can see on the screens that some of the cardinals who've just emerged from the conclave, these are the people who voted in favor of the new pope. They have emerged. They're standing on some of the other balconies as well. And the feeling that you get from watching this play out in the Vatican City is that no one wants to miss what is going on. Everybody wants to be a part of what is happening there. And you can imagine, of course, why. The square is thronging with people this evening. They all want to be a part of this. They all want to be part of a historic moment. And that is indeed what I am expecting to happen in a few moments when the new Pope, we presume, will actually emerge and speak. So we've had the smoke, if we recap, at about 8 minutes past 6 our time. We had the white smoke from the conclave. We then, just a few moments ago, had the official announcement in Latin that we have a new Pope, and the announcement of the new Pope, who, of course, is now Pope Leo, but was Cardinal Robert Prevost. I know that there are one or two articles written early this morning that suggested that he might be a leading candidate for the position, but of course very difficult to know in advance what was going to happen. And you will recall, as the cardinals went into the conclave, they each took an oath not to reveal what happened there prematurely. By the way, the penalty for that, in other words, if they broke that oath, was something that would be extraordinary in Catholic terms. It would be excommunication from the church. You can imagine how serious it would be for someone in a senior role as a cardinal to be excommunicated, rejected, formally never allowed to return to the church. And we can see some movement on the balcony now, as from what I can see, a procession may well be about to begin. And I suspect this might be the beginning of the announcement and the beginning, I think there we are, of the first statement by the new Pope. And we do expect, in fact, there he is. He's come out and has started to talk there, to try and to basically essentially come and start talking to us. We can go now live to the Vatican City.
As you've said,
that is the beginnings there of the situation, waving now with both arms. Pope Leo, as the name that he has taken, is waving both arms now with his left arm as he waves to the thousands of people who have gathered to see him there and are, of course, just watching him there. Father Russel Pollitt joining us again. Father Pollitt, good evening. A very historic moment as we watch the new Pope waving to the thousands of people beneath him.
Yes, indeed, Stephen, and quite surprising. I mean, first of all, an American, which surprises me given the current global situation, and also someone who has taken the name Leo, which is quite important because the last Leo the 13th, wrote a very famous document called Rerum Novarum, where he was really pleading for the cause of workers and that the capitalist system is one that would be much more kind of equal than it was. And so this was a watershed document. So it says something as well about what line I think this Pope is going to take. He's been working in the Vatican for a while. He was in charge of the dicastery for bishops. In other words, he was someone who helped Pope Francis choose bishops throughout the world. But he is also belonging to a religious order. So like Pope Francis was a Jesuit, he belonged to the Order of St. Augustine. So we call that a religious community that he comes from, and he had numerous leadership roles in that order as well. So very interesting. Worked in South America, as far as I can make out, for a while. Has been out of the United States for a long time. So will be interesting to see where we're going.
Interesting because, as I understand it, actually became a citizen of Peru. He had spent so much time there. Quite a journey from Chicago to Peru. And someone who clearly has identified with people there. So I imagine there'll be parts of South America tonight who are claiming it's their second Pope in a row.
Yes, I'm sure they will. Because, as you say, he was naturalized there. And clearly as well, one thinks about maybe the situation in Peru and the name that he's chosen, the economic situation there, probably says something about his papacy. He is, however, I notice on the visuals, dressed very traditionally in the papal attire as well. He's wearing the red, which Pope Francis did not wear the night that he appeared out on the balcony. So that also says something maybe of him being...
Father, I'm going to stop you there. The new Pope is now speaking.
Fratelli, sorelle carissimi, questo è il primo saluto del Cristo risorto, il buon pastore che ha dato la vita per il gregge di Dio. Anch'io vorrei che questo saluto di pace entrasse nel vostro cuore, raggiungesse le vostre famiglie, a tutte le persone, ovunque siano, a tutti i popoli, a tutta la terra. La pace sia con voi. Questa è la pace di Cristo risorto, una pace disarmata e una pace disarmante, umile e perseverante. Proviene da Dio, Dio che ci ama a tutti incondizionalmente. Ancora conserviamo nei nostri orecchi quella voce debole ma sempre coraggiosa di Papa Francesco che benediva a Roma. Il Papa che benediva Roma dava la sua benedizione al mondo intero quella mattina del giorno di Pasqua. Consentitemi di dar seguito a quella stessa benedizione. Dio ci vuole bene, Dio vi ama tutti e il male non prevarrà. Siamo tutti nelle mani di Dio. Pertanto, senza paura, uniti, mano nella mano con Dio e tra di noi. Andiamo avanti. Siamo discepoli di Cristo. Cristo ci precede. Il mondo ha bisogno della sua luce. L'umanità necessita di Lui come il ponte per essere raggiunta da Dio e dal suo amore. Aiutateci anche voi, poi gli uni gli altri, a costruire i ponti con il dialogo, con l'incontro, unendoci tutti per essere un solo popolo, sempre in pace. Grazie a Papa Francesco. Voglio ringraziare anche tutti i confratelli cardinali che hanno scelto me per essere successore di Pietro e camminare insieme a voi come Chiesa unita, cercando sempre la pace, la giustizia, cercando sempre lavorare come uomini e donne fedeli a Gesù Cristo, senza paura, per proclamare il Vangelo, per essere missionari. Sono un figlio di Sant'Agostino, agostiniano, che ha detto: con voi sono cristiano e per voi vescovo. In questo senso possiamo tutti camminare insieme verso quella patria la quale Dio ci ha preparato. Alla Chiesa di Roma un saluto speciale. Dobbiamo cercare insieme come essere una Chiesa missionaria, una Chiesa che costruisce i ponti, il dialogo, sempre aperta a ricevere, come questa piazza con le braccia aperte, a tutti coloro che hanno bisogno della nostra carità, la nostra presenza, il dialogo, l'amore. Y se me permiten también una palabra, un saludo a todos aquellos, y en modo particular a mi querida diócesis de Chiclayo en el Perú. Donde un pueblo fiel ha acompañado a su obispo, ha compartido su fe y ha dado tanto para seguir siendo iglesia fiel de Jesucristo. A tutti voi, fratelli e sorelle di Roma, d'Italia, di tutto il mondo, vogliamo essere una Chiesa sinodale, una Chiesa che cammina, una Chiesa che cerca sempre la pace, cerca sempre la carità, cerca sempre di essere vicino specialmente a coloro che soffrono. Oggi è il giorno della supplica alla Madonna di Pompei. Nostra Madre Maria vuole sempre camminare con noi, stare vicino, aiutarci con la sua intercessione e il suo amore. Allora vorrei pregare insieme a voi. Preghiamo insieme per questa nuova missione, però per tutta la Chiesa, per la pace nel mondo, e chiediamo questa grazia speciale di Maria, nostra Madre. Ave Maria, piena di grazia, il Signore è con te. Tu sei benedetta fra le donne e benedetto è il frutto del tuo seno, Gesù. Santa Maria, Madre di Dio, prega per noi peccatori, adesso e nell'ora della nostra morte. Amen.
The new Pope Leo XIV addressing crowds there, speaking, of course, in Latin or Italian, and just speaking there, giving a blessing as well, greeting everybody with the phrase, peace be with you. We may hear a few words from him in English.
Il Santo Padre Leone, a tutti i fedeli presenti e a quelli che ricevono la sua benedizione a mezzo della radio, della televisione e delle altre tecnologie di comunicazione, concede l'indulgenza plenaria nella forma stabilita dalla Chiesa. Preghiamo Dio Onnipotente perché conservi a lungo il Papa a guida della Chiesa e conceda pace e unità alla Chiesa in tutto il mondo. Sancti Apostoli Petrus et Paulus, de quorum potestate et auctoritate confidimus, ipsi intercedat pro nobis ad Dominum. Amen. Precibus et meritis Beate Mariae semper Virginis, Beati Michaelis Arcangeli, Beati Ioannis Baptiste, et Sanctorum Apostolorum Petri et Pauli et omnium Sanctorum. Misereatur vestri omnipotens Deus.
That is the new Pope, the new leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV. An hour and a half ago, he was known as Cardinal Robert Prevost, the first Pope from the United States to be elected as leader of the Roman Catholic Church. There'll be full updates for you in the EWN bulletins throughout the night, more coverage through tomorrow as well, and more reaction and analysis through the evening. You're with The Money Show.
The Money Show.
Investment School.
The Investment School is brought to you by CFI, a leading global trading platform now available in South Africa. CFI Financial is an authorized financial services provider. Well, we are going to turn our attention to this this evening. And for a lot that's been going on around the world, not just related to the election of Pope Leo XIV, but we saw today the announcement of a trade deal between the US and the UK and a suggestion by the US President Donald Trump that the US and China will have a good weekend, a reference to their talks in Switzerland. As you know, the Trump trade wars have pretty much been the big economic story. And if you are at all involved in investing, that is the thing that you need to watch. So tonight on Investment School, where is the smart money going? Hlelo Giyose is the Chief Investment Officer and Principal at First Avenue Investment Management, and Patrick Mathidi is Head of Multi-Asset Strategies at Aluwani Capital Partners. Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Hlelo, let me just start with you. Yes, everything has been about Trump for the last 4 months. Indeed. We're allowed to be bored, and we would if we weren't so horrified.
Yes, sir.
But despite that, are there still big trends that you can use to guide investments going forward, even though the day-to-day, minute-by-minute, tweet-by-tweet focus is on Trump?
Do you know, yes, there are. As a matter of fact, I think that you do yourself a great favor by not paying attention to the minute-by-minute noise, if one can call it that. If you do have a North Star, stay focused on it. If you had an investment process, an investment philosophy, stick to it. And the reason I say that is because you saw when he made the announcement on April 2nd that tariffs kick in April 9th, what happened to the market? Well, today, the markets have recovered all those losses and more. So if you had stayed out because you're listening to all the scary detail and the gory details of it, you get lost in it, right? So you wouldn't have participated in the opportunity to invest more at that point in time or just keep carrying on.
Patrick, Mathidi, I suppose the question is, how do you work out what these mega trends are? And you've got to do a lot of sifting through some of this noise.
Good evening, Stephen, and thanks for having me. And good evening, Hlelo.
Hey, what's up, brother?
So a lot of these mega trends, Stephen, I mean, you need to think through them, quite a bit. So we tend to do scenarios where we look at long-term trends, what's likely to play out through a typical market cycle, and then try and capture, that equity premium where I think as Hlelo mentioned, you try and avoid the short-term volatility, the short-term noise, and then you stick to your guns and you chase that, that trend for as long as you believe it is still in play. So as and when, the markets ebb and flow, you get a pullback that gives you an opportunity to top up if you've got a bit of cash. But you kind of need to stay the course. And as long as those trends are still in play, hopefully you should be well rewarded for your patience through time.
Hlelo, I mean, just a few months ago, everyone was talking about artificial intelligence, the rise of all of that. They were talking about how important computing power was, NVIDIA, et cetera. And then everything changed. So particularly because of the limits on what NVIDIA can sell China, although, of course, there are ways that those chips still end up in China. Also concerns about China and Taiwan and the United States. But that artificial intelligence kind of super trend, does that still hold?
Do you know, not only does it hold, but it's extremely tangible. And I say it's tangible because it's not only the usage of it per product, but it's the variety in product that uses it, right? So you just think about today, if you go and search, you probably don't just go to Google anymore and put in a search. You probably choose Perplexity AI or choose Gemini or choose ChatGPT or choose Claude, right? And you put your search there, and it gives you a far greater refinement with much better granularity for what you're looking for than had you just gone to Chrome and put in the search like you usually did, right? And companies are starting to charge for that. You buy a subscription to that. So companies are monetizing AI, right? And the quicker the AI search engine, if you want to call it that, brings up information with great quality, that's the winner in the long term. And that's what AI, OpenAI and Microsoft I guess that's AI and ChatGPT, and that's what they're competing on with Claude and Gemini. Who has the best mousetrap to provide the most crisp information quicker?
I love that phrase, the mousetrap, that the world will beat a path down to a cheaper mousetrap. I forget who said it, but it goes back a long time ago in the United States. I suppose it reminds me, Patrick, because, a few years ago, not long ago, everyone was talking about fintech this, fintech that, fourth industrial revolution. Someone someone claimed to be a champion of it. I forgot who that was. Has all of that sort of disappeared, or has it been kind of moved into artificial intelligence, or did this sort of tsunami of artificial intelligence just take it all over?
No, so a lot of these mega trends, they don't just disappear and then you try and catch the next fad, so to speak. What tends to happen is you have your first, movers who grab the headlines. If you go back to the AI space, your NVIDIAs of this world, and then they run the course, and then you've got others who then try and jump on the bandwagon. And then what then happens is you have the second generation coming in, the users of this new technology, the net beneficiaries, which then results in another wave that comes through that may not be as vicious or as visible as the first one. Right, so the guys who can monetize, that technology and actually embed it within their businesses, such that they become a lot more efficient, they become a lot more profitable. They get to use, less resources, to generate more revenue. Those then become sort of the second generation of our beneficiaries, and then you sort of see the same happening elsewhere in the other industries where you've got other mega trends taking place. So to come back to the fintech space, yes, you also have first-time movers, but then you also then have others who then try and then benefit and actually even perfect some of the initial mistakes made by some of the first movers. So these things, if it's a proper mega trend, it just does not disappear that easily. It goes through waves, it ebbs and flows, and then you get, yesterday's, let's say, losers who are then awake and then sort of come and catch the trend, come through, perfect the technology or the processes, and then they become beneficiaries in terms of their own operations, and so it goes.
It's always, the person who was second who often does so well. Google Chrome wasn't the first web browser. Netscape was. It was Netscape. It's that kind of thing. I suppose the question is, Hlelo, was there anything other than AI that's a mega trend at the moment? And I'm thinking in terms of trying to find value over the long term for various reasons because of the announcement over the weekend. I'm thinking a little bit of Warren Buffett. I'd like to think a bit more like him, but I'm thinking of him for the moment. And I'm talking about companies that you know are well run, have been well run for a long time, are going to be well run for a long time to come. So in South African terms, ShopRite, Capitec, places like that. Are those still that kind of value? Is that a mega trend that you shouldn't take your mind off, especially in an era where you probably have to diversify a little more?
Well, there's a difference between a mega trend and a great quality company. Right? A mega trend is more thematic and can be applied across verticals, right? Whereas ShopRite or Capitec, that's a vertical, right? So mega trend would be something like obesity with the GLP-1 drugs. I mean, those are a miracle cure because obesity, metabolic diseases are actually responsible for, I think now, 75% of all deaths, right? From a health standpoint, if you put aside trauma and accidents and so on, whether you succumb to a stroke or heart attack or, by the way, your cells morph into becoming cancerous, it's all a metabolic disease, right? So the mega trend is, how do you bring down obesity from where it is now? I think in the United States, they say 60% of the population is obese. Saudi Arabia is the most obese nation. And sadly, South Africa is not too far from that, right? So the question is, how do you bring that treatment to countries around the world at an affordable rate? Okay, at an affordable rate. If you can get that done, that's an incredible mega trend at an affordable rate.
And it has all sorts of consequences. It means that research into diabetes is going to completely change. The way we treat diabetes will completely change. The way, what happens in South Africa will completely change in terms of, people who sometimes are at risk of losing their feet because of diabetes, things like that. I mean, those are the kind of megatrends you want to really identify.
Yeah. And there are two companies that are really good at this, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. Very good. And they have, I think it's 102-year track record at it now, Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, by the way. They've been at it for that long. You cannot compete with these guys. Their intellectual capital at insulin production as well as obesity is second to none.
We're speaking to Hlelo Giyose, Chief Investment Officer and Principal at First Avenue Investment Management, and Patrick Mathidi, Head of Multi-Asset Strategies at Aluwani Capital Partners, tonight on Investment School.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
The Money Show.
Investment School.
Well, speaking in Investment School tonight about where the smart money is going during these difficult times, identifying megatrends that will kind of live past Trump's tweets. Hlelo Giyose is at First Avenue Investment Management. Patrick Mathidi's multi-asset strategies at Aluwani Capital Partners. And Patrick, I've been reminded, of course, that perhaps another megatrend is defense stocks, the prospect of war, what's happening with Russia and the rest of Europe. That suddenly is going to be something people are going to invest a lot of money in.
Yeah, absolutely. So not only defense as in traditional defense, but also if you think about robotics, right, in the manufacture of arms. So that's also another mega trend where it kind of cuts across different industries. So you're thinking defense, but also to think of automotive manufacturing. You think of other forms of manufacturing where the beneficiaries are entities that are looking to modernize their production facilities, They're employing these new, robotics technologies, which obviously the upfront capital outlay, can be hectic, but the operational costs, on an ongoing basis is a lot less. And that, the risk of being cynical, you tend to have less labor issues, because, robots don't go on strike. Mm-hmm. So you see that trend. I mean, it's been on for a while. Another one which has also been on for a while is the changing demographics, where if you look at studies, people are getting married a lot later, if at all, and if they do, they tend to have a lot smaller families than say perhaps the likes of us during our time. So that trend means that the average person, what they need, what they consume, where they stay, changes quite considerably versus the trends we saw a few decades ago, and hence you start to see this element of living and working and sort of playing in the same place, where you've got the buildings that you live in on the top floor, that's your apartment. Your middle section is your office space, and then the ground floor is where you do your shopping. So essentially, you don't have to leave unless you absolutely need to. So you see those trends playing out into different sectors where the guys tend to want to monetize and actually benefit going forward.
Hlelo, when you've got, if you're starting an investment portfolio and you're trying to identify these mega trends, you've got to look for opportunities to invest. I mean, I don't know how I would invest in European defense, but there must be opportunities, and you've got to look for companies that are exposed to that in some way.
And, many of them, because the European Union had limited defense spend as a percentage of GDP to 1%, right? Actually, I think budget, not GDP, to 1%. Many of those companies haven't been profitable, right? So they've just been, average, sometimes very poor from a profitability standpoint, and use up a lot of debt. But some of them have had incredible technology in them. So we found opportunity companies like Rheinmetall, I think is the German pronunciation of it, Hensoldt, which was unbundled out of Airbus. So you can find a few of those, Leonardo, you can find a few of those, and, but they have really shot up in price. They've run ahead of that. And then today there was a NATO summit on European security where the NATO Secretary General said not even 2.5% as a percentage of budget is enough. It needs to be north of 3%, and they have to do it quickly, and they have to do more and do it quickly. So you can only imagine how much further profitability these companies will enjoy.
Reminder that Rheinmetall has an office in the Western Cape. Of course, there was a difficult incident there a few years ago. Yeah. Patrick, do you need to be a bit more agile with your money, or do you need to do what Hlelo was telling us to do and what you suggested at the start? You stick to your philosophy no matter what. And I say that because I think after the events of the last couple of months, I mean, yes, people who stayed the course are probably smiling quite nicely, but they probably sweated a little bit while they were doing it.
Yeah, I think, it depends on your investment philosophy and what, I guess, your clients allow you to do. So there's nothing wrong with being agile, on the edges, where you are tactical and you try and capture opportunities that may present themselves. But you kind of need to have a clear sense of where you're going, right? So that, you do not veer too far off, from, as I think as Hlelo mentioned, your true north. So as and when you get these sharp pullbacks, and they present opportunities, within your area of focus, then by all means, do take advantage of that and top up if you've got the liquidity. And similarly, if you do see things that look ridiculously mispriced, as in suddenly things have just run ahead of themselves, run ahead of the fundamentals, nothing wrong with taking a little bit of profit, sort of banking that and then raising liquidity to can then deploy it as and when other opportunities come in. But I think by and large, you don't want to be schizophrenic, selling everything, just because of one event, overnight, and then coming back the following day and trying to chase and deploying everything back in again. So on the margins, yes, be tactical, be nimble to the extent that your capital providers allow you to, but don't try and be in here and try and predict and time the markets.
Patrick Mathidi, thank you. Head of Multi-Asset Strategies at Aluwani Capital Partners. Hlelo Giyose, good to see you again. Thank you so much for coming in. Chief Investment Officer and Principal at First Avenue Investment Management.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, it's been a special edition of The Money Show tonight. We didn't quite expect it, but the white smoke emerging from the Sistine Chapel meant that it would be. Thanks for being with us. We'll, of course, be back with you tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.